Hello, you are watching Shalom World News. I'm Marina Grossu from Washington, D.C. Here are the latest headlines from around the world. Terror organization Hamas has released the footage of 3 Israeli women hostages as Israel advances its ground operations in Gaza. The 3 women have been identified as Daniel Aloni, Ramon Kirsch, and Lena Trupanov. Hamas kidnapped the women when they attacked southern Israel, killing 1,400 people, mostly civilians, and kidnapping over 230. The women featured in the video are seen addressing Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu's office described the video as cruel psychological propaganda by Hamas-ISIS in a statement released on Monday. Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar declared that the terrorist organization is ready to carry out an agreement for the exchange of prisoners. Israel Defense Forces spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari referred to Sinwar's statement as psychological terror to create pressure. Meanwhile, Eli Beer, the founder of the medical volunteer organization United Hatzalah, which has been treating victims in southern Israel, reported witnessing a dead baby that had been burnt alive by Hamas inside an oven. In addition to calling for Jerusalem to have a special status, Pope Francis stated on Wednesday that a two-state solution between Israel and Palestine was necessary to end conflicts like the one that is currently raging. During a televised interview on Italy's Rai TV channel, the Holy Father said he hoped a regional escalation could be avoided in the conflict that began when Hamas militants entered Israel, killing some 1,400 Israelis, mainly civilians, and taking about 230 people hostage. Pope Francis, who has demanded a ceasefire and humanitarian corridors to aid Gazans, said he interacts with priests and nuns daily over a phone at a church in Gaza that was providing sanctuary to roughly 560 people, the majority of whom were Christians. The Holy Father expressed concern over the rise in anti-Semitism and said people shouldn't let the conflict between Israel and Hamas overshadow other ongoing wars such as those in Yemen, Myanmar, Ukraine, and Syria. In the United States, the heads of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security has acknowledged the terrorist threats to the nation in the midst of the uncertainty worldwide and the Israel-Hamas war. This was the message from experts testifying on Tuesday at Capitol Hill regarding the threats to the U.S. FBI Director Christopher Wray testified that lone actors and homegrown terrorists influenced by foreign terror groups are the biggest threats facing America. He also admitted that the gaps in intelligence are real, adding that it was not a time for panic, but instead a time of vigilance. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas faced questions on his agency's efforts to keep track of known terrorists who cross the southern border. He said that individuals imposing risks to national security are of the highest importance. Left-wing dark money groups have been accused of heavily endorsing an Ohio constitutional amendment that would make abortion a protected practice. According to a recent report, the Progressive 1630 Fund, managed by the Washington, D.C.-based consulting firm Arabella Advisors, sent the Ohioans United for Reproductive Rights Committee at least $5.4 million in support of Ohio's proposed constitutional amendment. The campaign also received $3.5 million from the George Soros-backed Open Society Policy Center. In recent years, both organizations have contributed millions of dollars to anti-Israel causes, according to a New York Post investigation. On November 7th, Ohioans will cast their ballots on whether or not to include abortion in the state constitution. Those who oppose the proposal, known as no voters, contend that doing so will nullify any existing restrictions on abortion and introduce ambiguous language that would impede parental rights. Catholic bishops in the American state of Texas have supported a new bill that would create a publicly funded education savings account, or ESA, for students who wish to join private schools. The prelates of the state have urged the faithful to support the school choice bill that was recently introduced in legislature. On Tuesday, Governor Greg Abbott said he had reached an agreement with Texas House leadership on the bill to create $10,400 ESA fund annually for students. The Texas Catholic Conference of Bishops said it was hopeful that this comprehensive approach would result in strong reforms and funding of public schools, as well as provide parents with more access to other educational options. The legislation has eligibility criteria such as prioritization for low-income disabled students and kids from households making less than 185% of the federal poverty level. Pope Francis has issued a new motu proprio that reforms the statutes of the Pontifical Academy of Theology belonging to the Dicastery for Culture and Education. Titled Ad Theologiam Promovendam, the motu proprio says that the practice of theology in the future cannot be limited to abstractly reproposing formulas and schemes of the past. The pontiff said that theology is called to prophetically interpret the present and discern new paths for the future. The Pope says in the document that the Academy has constantly embodied the demand to put theology at the service of the Church and the world. He added by saying that theological reflection is called to a change of direction, to a brave cultural revolution that knows to interpret the gospel according to the context that men currently live in. Hungary has prohibited minors from taking part in a press photo expo because of the LGBTQ content in the event. Lawmaker Dora Duro reported a controversial exhibit during a visit to the event and said the country must carefully consider what norms it conveys to youth. The objectionable photographs depict an elderly LGBTQ community in the Philippines, and they were judged inappropriate for children, as many subjects in the visuals had cross-dressed. The government, led by Prime Minister Viktor Orban, is a staunch supporter of a traditional family and Christian values. Over the last few years, it has made a push to implement laws that curb the spread of LGBTQ and gender agenda. Children are banned from taking part in events that promote the homosexual agenda, and the curbs are applied to television, movies, books, and ads. In the U.S. state of Florida, Attorney General Ashley Moody urged the state Supreme Court to reject a proposal to amend the Constitution seeking to enshrine abortion rights. Moody described the proposal as an effort to hoodwink voters. The Attorney General filed a 39-page brief arguing that the proposal should be kept off the ballot, scheduled for next year. Moody cited the argument that the wording of the ballot summary misleads voters. She said the summary was part of a scheme to lay ticking time bombs that enable abortion proponents later to argue that the amendment has a broader meaning. The so-called Floridians Protecting Freedom Political Committee is trying to pass the proposed amendment. This comes after Governor Ron DeSantis and the legislature passed curbs on abortion. Residents in northeastern Nigeria reported that extremist terrorists killed at least 37 villagers in 2 separate attacks. The extremists targeted villagers in Yobe State's Gaidam district on Monday and Tuesday. Witnesses reported that they first shot and killed 17 people, then used a landmine to kill 20 others who had gone to attend their funeral. At least 35,000 people have been killed and over 2 million displaced due to the extremist violence in Borno State, which neighbors Yobe. Since taking office in May, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has failed to put a stop to the security crisis that the country is experiencing in the northeast, northwest, and central areas, where dozens of armed groups have been killing villagers and kidnapping tourists for ransom. Pope Francis said on Wednesday that he would be present at the COP28 climate conference, which will take place in Dubai starting next month. This would be the first time a pope would be attending an environmental conference since they started in 1995. In a televised interview, the Pope said he planned to visit Dubai from December 1st to 3rd for the conference being held from November 30th to December 12th. The Pope is said to emphasize, while in Dubai, his recent call for efforts to slow global warming. We still have to stop global warming. Our children's and our grandchildren's futures are in jeopardy. Some accountability is required, said the Holy Father. The 86-year-old pontiff met with COP28 President Sultan Al-Jaber last month. On Wednesday, a group of rights activists launched a website with the hope of getting justice for victims of state oppression in Myanmar. Thousands of people have been killed in the Asian country since the military seized power in February 2021. More than 1.8 million people have been displaced by military offensives, says the UN. The new website, Myanmar.securityforcemonitor.org, is an interactive online version of the report under whose command human rights abuses under Myanmar's military rule. It was compiled by Columbia Law School Human Rights Institute's Security Forces Monitor. The project's team constructed a timeline of senior commanders and their postings, which can be correlated with documented instances of alleged atrocities. In honor of the 75th anniversary of the Declaration of Human Rights, the International Political Network for Values, which unites social activists and political figures with the pro-life and pro-family viewpoint, has announced that its 5th International Summit will take place in New York on Thursday and Friday, November 16th and 17th. Its motto is to affirm universal human rights. Pro-life and pro-family leaders from around the world will gather in New York to bolster the fight for religious liberty, the family, and life. Some of the leading speakers include the president of the Political Network for Values and former presidential candidate of Chile, Jose Antonio Cast, actor, producer, and pre-candidate to the 2024 presidency of Mexico, Eduardo Verástegui, president of Family Watch International, Sharon Slater, and Lila Rose, president of Live Action. The primary goals of the summit are to defend the most basic liberties of human life, uphold family values, and vigorously oppose the New World Order. And those are your latest headlines. Join us again tomorrow for more. You can also visit us at swnews.org for more updates. Shalom.